This video is sponsored by Zest Tea.
Okay, so it looks like you are going to be with us for a little while. That's no problem. We are just going to draw a little blood, and then we'll get you fitted for a nice straight jacket.
It's that time of year. But I thought in lieu of reviewing some scary movie or a TV show, instead, I'd rather talk about a staple of the horror movie genre, the asylum, where the mad are sent to scream from within inside padded cells, their howls echoing down dimly lit halls.
Yeah, except have you ever stopped to think about how messed up that is? That's right, it's time to talk about another trope that has some rather nasty baggage behind it. And today, we're going to be talking about depictions of mental health facilities and mental health care professionals in popular culture. Because if I were to tell you that a film or a TV show took place in an asylum or had a character being committed to one, what are you more likely to picture in your head? This or this? Are you more likely to assume it's a story about recovery or a story about succumbing to madness? If a character gets committed, are you going to think, oh, I hope they get the help they need? Or are you going to think, oh, shit, no? I'm pretty confident in saying it was the latter case for most, if not all of you, on all of those instances. And most of us can thank, at least in part, the pop culture depiction of mental health facilities and professionals for that perspective. Now, some people may well have their opinion of mental health facilities shaped by personal experience, but for the rest of us, because despite what some folks may think, I've only ever been diagnosed with ADHD and nothing more severe than that, we as an audience are going to cue off the depictions provided to us by the entertainment that we consume, and that is overwhelmingly negative. Now, as with every trope I talk about, this is not meant to be a condemnation of any particular piece of work, and I am going to cite more than a few films that I actually genuinely like, but I'm going to cite them for negative depictions. But as with any trope, the issue is in the overuse. The problem is the pattern, because it becomes the default that shapes our thoughts and our feelings about something, and this is something that is very real, and many of us lack firsthand knowledge of it. And I'm also not going to pretend that the horrifying asylum archetype doesn't have some basis in reality. There have been many points in history where mental health practices were at best misguided and at worst actual atrocities, and such things can still happen even now, but that's also true of traditional medicine, but you don't see every depiction of a hospital as a rundown hellhole filled with sadistic doctors and indifferent nurses. I'm going to be getting into a whole bunch of examples, but stick around even after I show you the receipts on this, because we're going to have to talk about the potential hazards of these depictions being so common. Now, as I get into these, I'm going to be focusing primarily on mental health facilities and also some citations of specific professionals, such as therapists or psychiatrists. There's a couple of things that I won't be including, at least not directly. Things like substance abuse rehab and group therapy, except for where they overlap with more generalized mental health facilities. The reasons for this is that it's actually fairly common to get single scenes of something like group therapy in a film, otherwise not about it. And drug rehab really does get treated different from general mental health, and accordingly the societal attitudes towards each is a bit different, so that felt like muddying the waters to lump that in. Additionally, I am trying to focus this on the depiction of mental health professionals, not on people with mental health conditions. That is honestly its own can of worms, and one that we should all be aware of. I don't have the space to do it justice here. Coming up with negative examples was preposterously easy. Even sticking to mainstream entertainment and avoiding the mountain of dirt-cheap direct-to-streaming horror movies set in asylums. For the most part, I found that most negative depictions sorted into one of three categories. Facilities that gaslight their patients, facilities that are basically a prison for specific kinds of bad people, and facilities that are just flat-out nightmarish hellholes. Now, since I already mentioned it, I should define the term gaslighting. It refers to the mental and emotionally abusive practice of making a person doubt their memory, cognitive ability, or sanity. So in that vein, we have films like Sucker Punch or Glass, where it is to the advantage of the characters running the facility to make the patients doubt their own perceptions. In the same line of thinking, we have Terminator 2, which took the fairly reasonable psychiatrist character from the first film and had him lock up Sarah Connor and make it his mission to convince her that she was delusional when she was not. There's also the film The Changeling, based on real-life events, where an entire police department conspired to gaslight a woman whose son has been kidnapped into believing that they had found him, when in fact the child they brought to her was not her son, and they were fully aware of that. Under the asylums are just a special kind of prison depiction. We've got the Halloween franchise, Silence of the Lambs. That one comes complete with a self-serving head psychiatrist for bonus points. Punisher Warzone, and literally anything involving Arkham Asylum for the Batman mythos. We pretty much never see these facilities depicted as places of treatment or of medicine. It's just where we house the crazy bad people. And then for the utter hellholes, we've got the likes of 12 Monkeys, Shutter Island, and oh, hey, look, it's Arkham again. American Horror Story's second season, fittingly titled Asylum, manages to be all of these things and is also my favorite season of the show. Go figure. There are also a handful of problematic outliers that don't fit cleanly into the other categories but are worth mentioning, like, say, Patch Adams, where the workers in a mental health facility that the titular character is in at the front end of the film aren't evil or uncaring, but are clearly incompetent and very unhelpful. There's Garden State, which treats going off your meds like the world's most cathartic and freeing experience. Or there's the recent Joker, which has healthcare workers so ground down by a system that isn't working, they seem to be doing little more than punching their time clocks day in and day out. Now, there are some depictions that aren't as wholly negative as the ones that I've been listing so far, but at the end of the day still paint an overall kind of dim view. One of the archetypical examples falls under this more mixed heading. I'm speaking of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This classic Jack Nicholson film, based on the novel of the same name, features a facility that is not shown to be miserable from the word go, but by the end, it's definitely not a place you're going to have a positive view about. Even though much of the trouble that is caused is stirred up, at least initially, by Nicholson's character of McMurphy, between the spiteful Nurse Ratched and the willingness of doctors to render a troublesome patient comatose, this is not shown to be a place of helping or of healing. Girl Interrupted falls under a bit of a similar heading. Angelina Jolie's character is ultimately the source of much of the trouble, but the facility isn't shown to be particularly effective, and the safety precautions are disturbingly lax with how often these people are running amok. There's the TV show House, which had the titular character check himself into a facility for both drug rehab and mental health issues, and while it doesn't appear to be an outright terrible place, and some value is placed on what's being done there, we still have the lax safety measures issue combined with House, whose medical training is in physical health, not mental, still having better luck diagnosing and assisting at least one other patient than the actual mental health professionals. There's A Beautiful Mind, which does acknowledge the lead character's need to confront the mental issues he's been ignoring, but in the end, the solution isn't medication or even therapy, it's deciding to not believe his delusions anymore. I feel like a lot of comedic portrayals of mental health professionals fall into this more mixed category as well, whether it be something like Analyze This or more Woody Allen movies than I would care to count, and also won't watch anyways because, ew. One can argue that there's an attempt to normalize therapy and things like this, but it's still ultimately being presented as a source of laughter, something to mock and take amusement from. Even my favorite Broadway musical, Next to Normal, has a mixed depiction at best. While I'll praise that show for its examination of the impact of mental illness on a family and its brilliant ending that manages to be both somber and uplifting, ultimately the treatments and medications given to the character of Diana are ineffectual in the end. And I don't believe it to be the intended message of the show. I still would find it understandable if some people came away after seeing that play thinking, oh yeah, mental illness caused a lot of problems, but I mean, none of the drugs or treatments helped, so what good did any of that do? So, what is the cumulative effect of all this? Well, I would be far from the first person to point out that on the whole, our society in this country has a fundamentally different view of mental health than it does of physical health. While people with physical health problems are sadly often left to struggle in ways that shouldn't happen in a civilized society, only the sketchiest of edgelords would tell somebody confined to a wheelchair that it's all in their heads and that they're weak if they need help. Mental health, though? In America, at least, mental health concerns carry a very heavy stigma, and seeking help with them seems to largely play into that stigma rather than alleviate it. By and large, the cultural attitude towards professional help or medication for mental health issues is that they placate, numb, or zombify the person so they don't have to deal with their problems, rather than being seen as an actual way to address those issues. Someone with a broken leg who has a cast on isn't shamed as weak or somehow a failure for needing that help. But then that might also speak to part of the disconnect. When it comes to matters of physical health, there is often at least a potential for a full recovery. The image most able-bodied people have of physical health is that something went wrong, you get treated, it gets better, you're back to normal. Now, there are, of course, chronic physical conditions which break this narrative, but the thing is, virtually every mental health condition breaks that narrative. A mental health condition, be it PTSD, ADHD, autism, depression, Tourette's, or anything else, is not something that is ever going to be cured in the way that people think of physical health. It can be managed, but it won't ever just go away. That isn't how it works. And I think that honestly scares a lot of people. The idea that some pains, some health issues won't ever be truly fixed. And I put air quotes on that for a reason, because some of us with some of these conditions don't think there's actually anything wrong with us. We just process differently from the rest of you. And while I would never claim that the depiction of mental health facilities and workers as either evil or ineffectual is somehow the root cause of this overall cultural perception, it does definitely play into it and reinforce it. So much like every kind of representation I talk about, if you don't have real-life experience with this kind of thing, then you tend to lean on the pop culture depiction of it. And if the most common depiction is this negative, that's more than a little concerning. But I get to bring it back to a more uplifting note, because there are depictions of mental health and mental health professionals that I can comfortably label as positive. Not nearly as many as I would like, and I hope folks will drop even more down in the comments, but they are certainly out there. There's Robin Williams' Sean Maguire in Good Will Hunting, who is able to reach an angry young man who has never had support for his emotional and mental health in the way that Williams is able to provide. There's The Sopranos and the character of Jennifer Melfi, played by Lorraine Bracco. While not an idealized portrayal, that can be chalked up to her being a flawed human character, but the actual work that she does with Tony is largely shown to be necessary and is respectful of the therapeutic process. And then there's the show that I really want to talk about, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. If you've never seen it, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is a musical comedic drama created by and starring Rachel Bloom, an extremely talented actress that I was in a movie with once. Yeah, don't be that impressed. The movie never got a release and she'd have no reason to remember me. But anyways, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend follows the character of Rebecca Bunch, an up-and-coming lawyer in a New York City law firm who is deeply unhappy with her life. A chance meeting with her crush from summer camp back in her teen years prompts her to quit her job and move across the country to West Covina, California in the hope of rekindling that romance. 4 seasons of musical shenanigans ensue, but here's the thing I want to focus on, and this is going to involve some later season spoilers. The show is still well worth your time, even knowing the things I'm about to tell you. The impulsive and destructive choices that Rebecca makes throughout the show are frequently played for comedy, but the show also recognizes that these come from somewhere. Rebecca isn't wacky, she's hurting, she's traumatized, and she's very bad at recognizing how poorly she copes with any of that. This culminates in Rebecca's suicide attempt halfway through the 3rd season. This is the point at which she finally tries to seriously engage with her mental health. She's had a therapist since the 1st season, but she never did the work, which is really key to this depiction, because it's true that while her therapy doesn't really seem to be helping for a long time, it's also very clear that Rebecca's situation is not a failure of the medicine, it's her own continued failure to actually do what's being asked of her and to follow the advice she's being given. Even as she eventually sees other doctors, attends both individual and group therapies, and continues to struggle, it's never framed as the mental health tools she's offered being ineffectual. And the show spends a full season and a half dealing with the repercussions of her actions and how much work she has to put in so that she can start to address her issues. The show even tackles things like backsliding without acting like it means that her treatments failed. It is an amazing portrayal of mental illness and, more importantly to this video, the professionals who try to help people with it, to the point of being praised by Psychology Today. And on top of that, it has hilarious songs, an awesomely diverse cast, fantastic LGBTQ plus representation, and look, this show is really, really good, and if you haven't seen it, I can't recommend it enough. Now, a show like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, not only being made, but doing well and being praised for its work, feels like a step in the right direction of depicting mental health and mental health professionals in a more positive light. But it's also just one show. I deeply, desperately hope that this is the start of a trend and not a one-off, because when we think about our loved ones or ourselves seeking mental health treatment, our first thoughts should not include straitjackets, padded rooms, and electroshock. That's not to say we couldn't all use a jolt from time to time, which brings us to this sponsor's video. Wait, really? We're really going with that. Electroshock to caffeinated tea. Okay. Zest Tea offers a variety of products from canned sparkling teas to more traditional bagged or loose leaf teas and even CBD products. With more caffeine than a cup of coffee, it's a way for tea drinkers to get the energy they need. All products are available for either a one-off purchase, or you can also subscribe for regular deliveries, and be sure that you will never be short of what you need. And if you use the link below and the coupon code Nathaniel, yes, that is my name if you've never watched the credits, if you use that, you can get free shipping on your first purchase. So, that wraps up this one. Depiction of mental health facilities and professionals. What do you think about this? What examples would you offer of positive depictions of mental health workers? And if you've seen Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, what's your favorite song from it? I'll always have a soft spot for the sexy Getting Ready song, but I think I'd have to give the top spot to You Stupid Bitch. Oh, that one's so epic. Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments. Let's talk about it. And in addition to today's sponsor, this channel is, as always, supported by Patreon. There's the thing that keeps me fed. And all the usual like, share, subscribe, etc. But I can't tell you what to do, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Be safe.